The crystal spires of Valdris Prime stretched toward the twin suns like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the assembled might of the Galactic Council. Inside the Grand Chamber, 12 species had gathered for their monthly review of emerging civilizations, each representative sitting in their specially designed environmental pods that maintain the precise atmospheric conditions their biology required. Ambassador Thane of the Soros Empire flexed his clawed fingers as he accessed the holographic display before him. His reptilian features showed barely concealed amusement as humanity's file materialized in the air above the council table. The data streams painted a picture of technological mediocrity that made several delegates hiss with derision. "Behold, the latest candidates for galactic membership," Thane announced, his voice carrying the arrogant tone that had made him famous throughout Soros space. "The species calls themselves humans, though their achievements hardly warrant such grandiose self-naming." The holographic displays showed crude human spacecraft that looked like they had been assembled by children playing with scrap metal. Thick armor plates covered hulls that leaked radiation signatures like broken containers. Chemical rockets provided propulsion through methods so primitive that even the youngest Soros engineer would laugh at their inefficiency. These vessels moved through space with all the grace of tumbling asteroids, leaving trails of waste heat that could be detected from 3 star systems away. Hive Queen Raz clicked, her mandibles in a rhythm that indicated deep amusement among her species. Her compound eyes reflected the holographic data as her telepathic voice reached every mind in the chamber. "Their defensive capabilities are even more pathetic than their transportation methods," she observed. "Kinetic projectiles fired from chemical propellants, basic energy beams that barely qualify as weapons, and shield generators that a single plasma burst could overwhelm." The other delegates murmured their agreement in languages that ranged from harmonic tones to electromagnetic pulses. The Vorlock representative, a massive being covered in metallic scales, rumbled his approval of the assessment. Even the peaceful Aquari, whose translucent forms swayed gently in their water-filled chambers, seemed disappointed by humanity's technological stagnation. Echo, the Luminari delegate, existed as a shifting pattern of pure energy that occasionally took vaguely humanoid form. Their telepathic voice carried undertones of concern as they addressed the assembly. "Perhaps we should exercise caution in our judgment," Echo suggested. "Some species develop along unconventional paths that may not be immediately apparent to our standard evaluation methods." The suggestion was met with a wave of dismissive laughter from the more militant species. Admiral Grunt of the Vorlic Navy accessed his own tactical displays, showing detailed analysis of human military capabilities. "Their entire planetary defense grid could be neutralized by a single Vorlic destroyer," he stated with absolute confidence. "These humans pose no threat to galactic stability and offer no innovations that could benefit our collective advancement." Thane manipulated the holographic controls to display humanity's expansion patterns across their local star cluster. A dozen small colonies spread across nearby systems, each one established through slow, methodical expansion that suggested complete ignorance of faster-than-light communication networks. Their settlement patterns followed predictable resource gathering, strategies that any first-year military academy student could counter. "Observe their colonization methodology," Thane continued, highlighting supply routes that meandered through space like the paths of lost travelers. "No quantum tunneling networks, no dimensional fold technology, no reality manipulation capabilities whatsoever. They move through space as if they have never heard of advanced physics, relying on brute force solutions to problems that more sophisticated species solved millennia ago." The Crystalline Collective's representative, a being composed entirely of living mineral formations, resonated with frequencies that indicated profound boredom. "Their technological advancement has remained essentially static for the past century of observation," they noted. "Minor improvements to existing designs, but no fundamental breakthroughs or paradigm shifts that would indicate true scientific understanding." Queen Raz accessed her own species intelligence reports, displaying intercepted human communications that revealed their internal political structures and resource allocation strategies. Their military spending focuses on quantity rather than quality, she observed. Mass production of inferior weapons rather than development of superior technologies. They appear to believe that throwing more ships at a problem will compensate for their technological disadvantages. The debate continued for nearly an hour as each species contributed their analysis of humanity's capabilities and potential. The consensus remained unchanged throughout the discussion. Humanity represented a typical Type II civilization that had achieved basic spaceflight but lacked the innovation necessary to advance beyond their current limitations. Their technology showed no signs of the quantum leaps that characterized truly advanced species. Admiral Grunt called for the formal classification. Vote, his massive form shifting in the reinforced chair designed to support his weight. All those in favor of classifying humanity as suitable for eventual integration into galactic civilization as a labor-class species? Every delegate raised their approval in their species-specific manner, creating a cacophony of sounds, lights, and telepathic signals that indicated unanimous agreement. The official records were updated immediately, consigning humanity to the same fate as dozens of other primitive species that had been absorbed into the galactic community over the past few millennia. Their worlds would eventually be incorporated into the greater civilization, their populations providing manual labor and basic services while the advanced species continued their expansion across the galaxy. As the delegates prepared to move on to other business, none of them noticed the subtle quantum fluctuations occurring in the empty space near the chamber's outer walls. Deep in the void between Valdris Prime and its nearest moon, something watched their proceedings through sensors that operated on principles unknown to galactic science. The observer recorded every word, every gesture, every tactical assessment. With perfect clarity, the data streams flowed through channels that existed outside normal spacetime, following paths that bent through dimensions the Council races had never discovered. The information traveled instantly across impossible distances, reaching destinations that existed between the spaces where matter and energy were supposed to be able to exist, somewhere in the darkness between stars. The true watchers of the galaxy received the Council's assessment with what might have been amusement if beings of their nature could experience such simple emotions. The test was proceeding exactly as planned, and soon they would learn whether this galactic civilization possessed the wisdom necessary to survive contact with technologies that transcended their understanding of reality itself. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's dismissive assessment when the trading station Haven Point received an unexpected visitor. The massive orbital facility hung in the neutral zone between 3 major stellar territories, its modular construction reflecting the cooperative efforts of multiple species working together for mutual profit. Merchants, diplomats, and travelers from across the galaxy mingled in its corridors, making it the perfect location for first contact with emerging civilizations. The human vessel that emerged from hyperspace near the station looked exactly like the intelligence reports had predicted. The UES Prometheus resembled a collection of metal boxes welded together by someone with more enthusiasm than skill. Its hull leaked radiation signatures that painted bright traces across every sensor array within detection range. Chemical exhaust ports scattered along its surface-vented atmosphere in ways that suggested either poor engineering or complete ignorance of efficient design principles. Grunt, the Vorlek administrator who managed Haven Point's daily operations, felt his metallic scales ripple with anticipation as he watched the primitive ship approach his station. His species had built their reputation on profitable trade relationships with less advanced civilizations, and these humans appeared to offer exactly the kind of opportunity that would boost his quarterly earnings reports. The docking process took nearly an hour as the human ship struggled with what should have been a simple automated procedure. Their pilots seemed unfamiliar with standard galactic docking protocols, requiring constant guidance from the station's traffic control systems. When the Prometheus finally sealed against docking port 7, the sound of escaping atmosphere could be heard throughout that entire section of the station. Captain Ward emerged from the airlock wearing what appeared to be a modified pressure suit that had been assembled from various incompatible components. His human features showed the kind of earnest enthusiasm that Grunt had learned to associate with species that were eager to trade valuable resources for basic technology. Behind Ward came 5 crew members who stared at the station's interior with wide-eyed wonder that seemed completely genuine. "Welcome to Haven Point," Grunt rumbled in Galactic Standard, his voice carrying the harmonics that indicated polite greeting among his people. "I am Administrator Grunt, and I hope we can establish profitable relationships between our civilizations." Ward's face lit up with an expression of gratitude that would have been difficult to fake. "This is incredible," he said, gesturing at the station's curved corridors and multi-species crowd. "Our scientists theorized about galactic civilization, but seeing it in person exceeds our wildest dreams. We have much to learn from advanced species like yourselves." The negotiation that followed played out exactly as Grunt had expected. The humans offered refined rare earth elements, exotic isotopes, and biological samples in exchange for what they called examples of galactic technology. Their shopping list read like a primer on basic spacefaring equipment, improved navigation computers, shield generators, atmospheric processors, and communication arrays. What impressed Grunt most was the humans' genuine amazement at even the most mundane galactic technology. When he demonstrated a standard personal translator, Ward and his crew gathered around the device as if they were witnessing a miracle. Their excitement over a basic gravity compensator was so authentic that Grunt found himself offering better exchange rates than he had originally planned. "Your shield technology is centuries ahead of anything we've developed," Ward admitted as he examined a standard defensive array that most galactic species considered obsolete. "Our best protection systems are basically armored plates with energy redistribution networks. This quantum field manipulation is beyond our current understanding." The trade negotiations continued for 3 days while the human crew explored Haven Point with the wide-eyed curiosity of tourists visiting their first major city. They asked endless questions about everything from artificial gravity systems to waste recycling methods. Their innocence was so complete that even the cynical Grunt began to feel protective toward these eager newcomers. Word of the human arrival spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Within hours, intelligence reports were flowing to military headquarters across known space, confirming every assumption the Council had made about human technological capabilities. The primitive ship, the crew's obvious inexperience with basic galactic technology, and their desperate eagerness to trade resources for obsolete equipment, painted a picture of a species that would be easily integrated into existing power structures. Soros. Military analysts began updating their conquest scenarios, calculating the minimal force required to overwhelm human defenses and secure their resource-rich worlds. Hive mining corporations started planning extraction operations that would strip human colonies of valuable materials while employing the local population as cheap labor. Even the peaceful Luminari discussed the ethical frameworks that would govern humanity's eventual transition from independence to galactic citizenship. What none of these observers suspected was that every piece of traded technology was being subjected to analysis more thorough than anything in their own scientific databases. Hidden within the Prometheus's crude-looking hull were quantum computers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, processing information through methods that transcended conventional understanding of physics and mathematics. The scanning arrays concealed throughout the human ship operated on principles that would have required the galaxy's greatest scientists working together for centuries to comprehend. Each primitive component actually housed sensors more sophisticated than anything the Council races had ever developed. The humans were studying their hosts with the same clinical detachment that xenobiologists might use when observing interesting, but ultimately simple life forms. Captain Ward maintained his role with perfect consistency, but careful observers might have noticed that his eyes held depths that suggested knowledge far beyond what any primitive spacefarer should possess. When he expressed amazement at galactic technology, His excitement focused not on the device's capabilities but on their limitations. The crude efficiency of council engineering fascinated him in the same way that stone tools might fascinate an archaeologist. The crew's genuine enthusiasm masked a different kind of truth. They were not amazed by what galactic technology could accomplish, but by how much effort the advanced species required to achieve such basic results. Their questions about artificial gravity systems were not attempts to understand how the technology worked, but rather efforts to comprehend why anyone would choose such inefficient solutions to simple problems. As the Prometheus prepared to depart Haven Point, Administrator Grunt felt genuine satisfaction at having established what promised to be a profitable long-term relationship. The humans had proven themselves to be exactly what the intelligence reports suggested: eager, primitive, and completely dependent on galactic goodwill. For their technological advancement, the primitive ship undocked with the same clumsy procedure that had marked its arrival, leaving behind trace elements that would allow galactic intelligence services to track its movements through hyperspace. As the Prometheus disappeared into the void, carrying its cargo of obsolete technology back toward human space, nobody suspected that the real cargo was flowing in the opposite direction through channels that existed outside the normal flow of space and time. The Outer Rim territories had always attracted those who preferred to operate beyond the reach of galactic law, and Commander Rex of the Soros Navy was no exception to this rule. His unauthorized squadron of 20 warships had been conducting what he euphemistically called training exercises in the disputed zones for months, but everyone knew their real purpose was to test the defenses of newly discovered civilizations. Before official contact protocols were established, New Montana represented the perfect target for Rex's ambitions. The remote human colony sat on the edge of explored space, far from any major shipping lanes or galactic patrol routes. Intelligence reports indicated a population of fewer than 50,000 farmers and miners, who had somehow managed to establish a self-sufficient settlement on a world rich in rare earth elements. More importantly, the colony's defensive capabilities appeared to consist of 3 orbital satellites and a handful of surface-based energy weapons. Rex studied the tactical displays in his flagship's command center while his subordinates prepared for what promised to be a routine demonstration of Soros superiority. The plan was elegantly simple: destroy enough infrastructure to make the humans understand their vulnerability, capture a few prisoners for interrogation, and withdraw before any galactic peacekeeping forces could respond to distress calls. The operation would send a clear message about human helplessness while providing valuable intelligence about their actual capabilities. The Soros fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Montana system with the kind of precision that had made their navy famous throughout the galaxy. 20 sleek warships arranged themselves in a standard assault formation, their plasma cannons charging while sensor arrays swept the system for hidden defenses or reinforcement fleets. The tactical computers identified exactly what the intelligence reports had predicted: a lightly defended agricultural world that would fall within minutes of serious attack. New Montana's orbital defenses responded to the intrusion with what appeared to be textbook procedures for a primitive civilization facing overwhelming odds. The 3 defensive satellites powered up their energy weapons and began broadcasting surrender negotiations, while the surface installations went to maximum alert status. Most tellingly, civilian transportation began fleeing the colony in small cargo ships that scattered toward the outer planets like frightened animals. Rex allowed himself a predatory smile as he watched the panicked evacuation. These humans were reacting exactly as expected, their terror confirming every assumption about their military incompetence. "Begin the demonstration," he ordered, his clawed fingers dancing across the targeting controls. "Disable their satellites first, then start hitting infrastructure targets. I want them to understand the futility of resistance." The first phase of the attack proceeded flawlessly. Soros plasma cannons reached across space to eliminate the orbital satellites with surgical precision, their energy beams punching through primitive shields as if they did not exist. The human defensive platforms died without returning fire. their destruction creating expanding clouds of debris that painted beautiful patterns against the planet's atmosphere. Surface targets fell just as easily. Power generation facilities exploded in satisfying fireballs, while transportation hubs simply ceased to exist under the impact of focused plasma bombardment. The humans' attempts to return fire were pathetic, their energy weapons dissipating harmlessly against Soros' shield technology that had been perfected through centuries of warfare. Rex was preparing to order the capture phase of the operation when his flagship's navigation system began experiencing what the damage control teams initially classified as minor malfunctions. Targeting computers started providing coordinates that placed enemy vessels in impossible locations. Communication arrays began receiving signals from sources that did not appear on any sensor display. The problems seemed random and unconnected, the kind of technical difficulties that occasionally plagued even the most advanced military hardware. The malfunctions spread through the Soros fleet with a precision that should have been impossible for random system failures. Navigation went offline first on every ship, leaving the squadron blind to their exact position relative to the planet. Communications followed immediately afterward, cutting each vessel off from the others while maintaining just enough internal function to ensure the crews remained aware of their isolation. Life support systems began cycling erratically throughout the fleet, not failing completely but creating enough instability to make every crew member uncomfortably aware of their dependence on technology that no longer seemed entirely reliable. Weapons remained functional and sensors continued to operate normally, ensuring that the Soros personnel could observe their helplessness without being able to do anything about it. Rex stood frozen at his command station as his flagship drifted powerless through space, its engines shut down by failures that left no trace of external interference. Around him, his crew struggled with equipment that had been functioning perfectly moments before, but now refused to respond to any commands. The tactical displays still showed New Montana hanging below them like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. But they might as well have been looking at a star in another galaxy. The moment when New Montana's true defenses revealed themselves would be remembered by the surviving Soros personnel for the rest of their lives. Previously invisible defensive platforms began materializing around the colony, not through conventional cloaking technology, but through methods that seemed to bypass the fundamental laws of physics. The platforms existed in a state of quantum superposition, phasing in and out of normal space-time like ghosts made solid. These were not the crude human constructions that galactic intelligence had predicted. Each defensive platform was a work of art that incorporated materials existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their surfaces reflected light in ways that hurt to observe directly, while their weapon systems operated on principles that made seasoned military veterans question their understanding of reality itself. The platform's weapons bypassed Soros shields entirely, reaching through dimensional folds to interact directly with target systems. Instead of destroying the disabled warships, they began making precise modifications to life support systems and engine controls. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. These unknown weapons could have destroyed the entire fleet instantly, but chose instead to demonstrate their complete mastery over Soros technology when the platforms finished their work. The Soros ships found their systems restored to full functionality with one critical modification. Their navigation computers now contained detailed records of the encounter along with coordinates for the fastest route back to Soros space. The message was clear: leave immediately and do not return. Rex led his humiliated squadron back to their home territory with a tale that should have changed galactic military doctrine forever. 20 advanced warships had been rendered helpless by defensive systems that operated beyond current understanding of physics. The humans possessed technology that could reach through space-time itself to disable enemy vessels without leaving any trace of how the attacks had been carried out. The official reports classified the incident as equipment malfunction caused by unknown spatial anomalies common in unexplored star systems. Rex's account was buried in classified files that would never see distribution beyond the highest levels of Soros command. The galaxy continued to view humanity as primitive and helpless, while somewhere in the darkness between stars, invisible observers cataloged another failed test of galactic wisdom and restraint. The Galactic Council had grown impatient with humanity's stubborn independence, and their solution reflected the kind of overwhelming force that had brought dozens of primitive species into line over the past millennium. 300 warships, representing every major galactic power, hung in formation near the edge of human space, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire worlds if necessary. This was not a diplomatic mission, but a demonstration of absolute superiority designed to end humanity's isolation through intimidation rather than negotiation. Admiral Rex commanded the operation from his massive flagship, the Imperator, a vessel so large that smaller ships could dock inside its cavernous hangar bays. The Soros had contributed 90 warships to the Joint Task Force, each one bristling with plasma cannons and reality-warping weapons that could tear holes in space itself. Beside them flew the elegant crystalline vessels of the Luminari, their translucent hulls housing consciousness, affecting technologies that could pacify entire populations without physical violence. Hive Swarm Leader Buzz coordinated the fighter. Wings from her bioship that pulsed with organic life, its living hull-spawning combat drones, faster than traditional manufacturing could produce conventional spacecraft. The insectoid vessels moved through space with fluid grace that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. Vorluk destroyers provided heavy bombardment capabilities, while the peaceful Aquarii contributed their defensive specialists to ensure minimal casualties during the inevitable surrender negotiations. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The combined fleet would surround Earth and its outer colonies simultaneously, demonstrating such overwhelming superiority that resistance would be psychologically impossible. Human leaders would be offered generous terms that allowed them to maintain some degree of autonomy in exchange for full integration into galactic civilization. Any attempt at defiance would be met with precisely calibrated force designed to break their will without causing unnecessary destruction. Intelligence reports indicated that humanity's total military capabilities consisted of perhaps 200 primitive vessels scattered across their dozen colonies. Even if every human ship gathered for a desperate final battle, they would be outnumbered by more than 10 to 1 by an enemy possessing technology centuries beyond their understanding. The outcome was so certain that several species had begun planning the victory celebrations. The Joint Task Force entered the Sol system with the kind of precision that spoke of countless similar operations conducted throughout galactic history. Earth hung before them like a blue jewel against the dark backdrop of space, its orbital installations and defensive satellites clearly visible to sensors that could detect a grain of sand from light years away. The planet's surface bristled with missile silos and energy weapon emplacements that registered as powerful but hopelessly primitive compared to galactic military technology. Admiral Rex felt a familiar surge of satisfaction as he surveyed the human defenses. A handful of crude spacecraft fled toward the outer planets, while Earth's orbital platforms powered up in what appeared to be preparation for a hopeless last stand. Everything confirmed the intelligence assessments. Humanity possessed the kind of desperate courage that made them useful as soldiers, but lacked the technological sophistication necessary to pose any real threat to galactic supremacy. The human response to their arrival was exactly what Rex had expected. Small defensive fleets positioned themselves around major population centers, while military commanders broadcast increasingly frantic communications between scattered installations. Their tactical deployments followed textbook patterns that any competent strategist could counter with minimal effort. Most importantly, they showed no signs of possessing any weapons or technologies that had not been thoroughly analyzed by galactic intelligence services. Rex opened communications with Earth's government using protocols designed to demonstrate the futility of resistance while offering reasonable terms for surrender. His transmission was broadcast across all frequencies to ensure that every human settlement could hear the ultimatum. "People of Earth," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered primitive worlds before. "You are surrounded by a force representing the combined military might of galactic civilization. Resistance is futile, but surrender will be rewarded with generous treatment. The terms he offered were surprisingly lenient by galactic standards. Humanity would be allowed to maintain their current government structure and cultural practices, in exchange for technological cooperation and resource-sharing agreements. Their colonies could continue operating under human administration while accepting galactic oversight and guidance. Most importantly, they would gain access to technologies that could advance their civilization by centuries within a single generation. The response came not from Earth's government, but from empty space itself, transmitted through communication channels that registered no source on any sensor display in the fleet. The voice spoke perfect galactic standard with an undertone of amusement that made veteran officers shift uncomfortably in their command chairs. The words were simple and direct. You have exactly 1 hour to withdraw from this system. This is your only warning. Laughter rippled through the command centers of the assembled fleet as officers realized that humanity's arrogance exceeded even their most pessimistic expectations. The idea that 200 primitive ships could threaten 300 advanced warships was so absurd that several commanders wondered if they were dealing with a species suffering from collective mental illness. Rex himself smiled with predatory anticipation as he realized that the humans would have to be taught their limitations through practical demonstration. The hour passed with growing tension as both sides prepared for the inevitable conflict. Human vessels continued their apparent retreat toward the outer planets, while Earth's defensive installations charged their weapons to maximum power. Galactic sensors detected no hidden fleets, no secret weapons, no technological surprises that might complicate the coming battle. Everything suggested that humanity was about to attempt the kind of hopeless last stand that had become legendary in galactic military history. Rex gave the order to begin tactical positioning with 5 minutes remaining in the ultimatum period. The massive fleet began arranging itself in a formation designed to demonstrate their overwhelming superiority while minimizing the time required to disable human resistance. Plasma cannons charged to full power while reality-warping weapons prepared to tear holes in space-time itself. The humans would witness forces beyond their comprehension before being offered one final chance to surrender. The moment when reality began to change around the galactic fleet was so subtle that most crews did not initially realize anything unusual was happening. Sensor readings remained normal, communication systems functioned perfectly, and weapons showed full readiness status. Only the most sensitive instruments detected quantum fluctuations occurring in the apparently empty space around. Their formation. Ships began vanishing from tactical displays, while their crews remained completely unaware that anything had changed. The Imperator's sensors showed empty space where Allied vessels should have been, but communication with those same ships continued normally. Admiral Rex found himself commanding a formation that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, each reality slightly different from the others, but all sharing the same inevitable conclusion. The invisible human fleet existed in dimensional spaces that bypassed normal physics entirely. They had not been hiding behind cloaking devices or quantum barriers, but had positioned themselves in the spaces between spaces, watching and waiting while reality itself bent around their presence. As the galactic fleet prepared to demonstrate their superiority, they discovered that they had already lost a battle they did not know they were fighting. The attack began precisely 60 minutes after humanity's warning expired, but the nature of the assault defied every principle of warfare that galactic civilization had developed over millennia of conflict. One moment, Admiral Rex commanded a formation of 300 vessels that dominated Earth's sky with overwhelming firepower, and the next moment he was struggling to understand how his fleet had become scattered across multiple dimensions while remaining physically unchanged. The human ships did not decloak or emerge from hyperspace because they had never been hidden in any conventional sense. They existed in the spaces between normal reality, occupying dimensional coordinates that had no meaning in standard physics. When they chose to reveal themselves, they did so by allowing portions of their forms to intersect with the three-dimensional space that galactic technology could perceive and measure. Each human vessel was a masterpiece of engineering that transcended conventional understanding of matter and energy. Their hulls incorporated materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating surfaces that reflected light from realities the galactic species had never discovered. The ships moved through space-time like living things, bending the fabric of existence around themselves rather than pushing through it with crude propulsion systems. Admiral Rex watched in growing horror as his tactical displays showed a formation that no longer made tactical sense. Ships reported normal status even as their sensors indicated empty space where allied vessels should have been visible. Communications continued between crews who could not detect each other's presence, creating a network of voices speaking to phantoms across impossible distances. The Imperator's reality shaper advisors spoke in panicked whispers about fundamental forces being rewritten by technologies that operated outside their understanding of what was possible. The Luminari consciousness specialists found their abilities useless against minds that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Even the Hive Queen's telepathic networks became confused when trying to process thoughts that originated from multiple dimensional coordinates. Simultaneously, the invisible human fleet struck with precision that demonstrated complete mastery over galactic technology. Each Council ship found its weapons disabled through quantum manipulation that operated below the subatomic level, reaching through dimensional barriers to modify the basic structure of matter itself. The attacks left no trace of external interference, because they originated from inside the target systems, adjusting fundamental constants until plasma cannons became incapable of generating coherent energy. Engine systems shut down through methods that bypassed every safeguard and backup system the galaxy's greatest engineers had devised. The human weapons did not destroy the propulsion units, but rather convinced them that motion itself was impossible, creating localized fields where the basic laws of physics operated according to different rules. Ships drifted helplessly through space while their crews struggled with equipment that had forgotten how to function. Life support systems throughout the galactic fleet underwent modifications, so subtle that most crews did not initially realize they had been altered. The changes ensured survival while demonstrating absolute control over every aspect of the vessel's operation. Atmospheric processors began producing air with trace elements that carried messages written in quantum signatures, while gravity generators created patterns that spelled out mathematical proofs in languages that would not be invented for another 1,000 years. Rex found himself commanding a fleet that existed in a state of controlled helplessness, maintained in perfect condition while being completely unable to fulfill its intended function. His weapons could not fire, his engines could not propel him toward any target, and his communications could reach his scattered ships but could not contact the homeworlds that had sent them. They were preserved like insects in amber, alive and aware but utterly powerless. The moment when the human vessels began decloaking marked the end of galactic civilization's understanding of technological possibility. The ships that materialized around the disabled fleet were not built according to any design principles that the galaxy's greatest minds had ever conceived. They incorporated materials that existed in multiple states simultaneously, possessed geometries that hurt to observe directly, and moved through space in ways that suggested complete mastery over the fundamental forces of reality. Captain Ward's voice filled every disabled ship simultaneously, transmitted through communication systems that had never been designed to receive signals from outside normal spacetime. His words carried the weight of absolute certainty as he explained humanity's true nature to the listening crews. For 3 centuries, we have been explorers of the spaces between spaces, he said, his tone containing the patience of someone explaining simple concepts to children. The revelation unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of impossible truths. Humanity had transcended conventional physics generations before the galactic species had achieved basic spaceflight. Their mastery of dimensional technology allowed them to exist simultaneously in multiple realities, observing and influencing events across vast distances without being detected by instruments that could only perceive three-dimensional space. The primitive ships and bumbling first contact protocols had been an elaborate test designed to evaluate galactic civilization's readiness for contact with technologies that could reshape existence itself. Humanity had sought to determine whether the council races possessed the wisdom necessary to handle power that transcended conventional understanding of matter, energy, and spacetime. The failed test demonstrated that the galaxy was not ready for such responsibility. The Council's immediate response to encountering a supposedly primitive species had been to plan conquest, exploitation, and forced integration into existing power structures. They had proven themselves incapable of recognizing potential equals or considering alternatives to domination as a solution to cultural differences. Ward continued his explanation while the human fleet maintained its demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority. "We could have revealed ourselves at any time during the past 3 centuries," he said, his voice reaching into the minds of listeners, who were beginning to understand the true scope of their miscalculation. "We chose observation and patience, hoping that your civilizations would develop the wisdom necessary to join us as equals rather than subjects." The human ships began releasing the disabled galactic vessels one by one, their weapons restoring full functionality to systems that had been modified beyond recognition. Each ship received detailed recordings of the encounter along with navigation data for the fastest route back to their respective homeworlds. The message was clear: return to your people and share what you have learned about the dangers of assuming superiority over the unknown. Admiral Rex led his humiliated fleet away from Earth, with the knowledge that his species had unknowingly been under observation by beings who possessed the power of gods, but chose to exercise the restraint of philosophers. The primitive humans they had dismissed as potential slaves were actually the guardians of technologies that could rewrite the basic laws of physics according to their will. The aftermath of the encounter rippled through galactic civilization like a shockwave that would reshape every assumption about technological development and interspecies relations. First contact protocols were completely rewritten as military. Leaders realized that apparent technological inferiority might actually indicate advancement so complete that it transcended conventional understanding. In the quiet spaces where few beings dared to venture, human observers continued their eternal watch over a galaxy that would never again underestimate the species that had learned to walk between worlds. They remained invisible guardians, protecting a universe from technologies it was not yet wise enough to handle, while patiently waiting for the day when galactic civilization might prove itself worthy of true partnership among the stars.